All right, I have 10:03. So to be respectful of your time, we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you that just joined, I'm Dr. Nicole Hutton, and I will be your facilitator in the main room throughout the workshop. I am pleased to welcome you on behalf of the NASA Unbound Coastal Issues team and hope that you will sign in for us today in the participant guide. A brief reminder of the purpose of this set of workshops, which is reaching greater potential of NASA data through collaboration between NASA data scientists and analysis and visualization practitioners in targeted communities. Our workshop will introduce some of the NASA data and tools available to support mitigation and resilience planning efforts. Also, a reminder of the documents available to you, a participant's guide, and our interactive Google folder for the day. Links will be pasted in the chat by Mr. Blake Steiner, a member of our project team. We encourage you to keep the participant guide open throughout the day and sign in if you have not done so already. We want to start by thanking our funder. The Unbound for Coastal Issues, UNBOUND CI, is a multi-session workshop supported by NASA's Understanding Needs to Broaden Outside Use of NASA Data, UNBOUND project. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this material are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of NASA. Also, we want to acknowledge that you had homework this weekend, and we have not forgotten. We do plan to address your homework at the top of our breakout session this afternoon. The purpose of today's workshop is to understand flood management and NASA resources, including the associated science, applications, and data. We will focus on the Worldview Earth data, Floods Data Pathfinder, commercial data, and Opera products, including DSWX and land surface. I would like to take a moment to review our facilitation team from ODU and UVA. Their names and pictures are included here. They will introduce themselves in the breakout sessions. I also want to thank our IT team and rotating student note takers, who, although not pictured, are much appreciated and will give a brief introduction of their name and affiliation in the breakout sessions. A brief reminder of the ground rules. Facilitators will be in the main session and breakout rooms to ensure things run smoothly. If there are any technical issues, questions, or comments for us, the speakers, or for each other, please place those in the Google Doc. We will be monitoring that throughout the session. Sessions will be recorded, and notes will be taken during the discussions. While we cannot prevent you from being known to your fellow participants in the live sessions, comments will not be attributable to any one person, or any products that are distributed will not have names associated with those comments. Keep in mind that there are no right or wrong answers. We are here to learn from you as much as we are to present information to you. We are looking for specific, realistic, and actionable recommendations, a diversity of recommendations. And we want those to range from the smallest things to big ticket items, for out-of-the-box thinking, and for anything that you find interesting. The registration includes guidelines about civility, acceptable language, privilege, inclusivity, etc., that we will adhere to. Please review those as needed. If you have not been able to arrange to receive the continuing education credits available through APA, CFPM, GISP, and others, please do so, or let us know if you are having difficulty so we can assist you. Now I would like to introduce our first demonstration speaker today. Our speakers will be time limited. Reminders will be placed in the chat and shown on the screen as each speaker approaches 5, 2, 1, and 0 minutes before I interrupt them to keep the session on time in respect of both their input and your time. Also, a reminder, all of our presenter slides will be shared with you in a follow-up email at the end of the day. At this time, I would like to introduce Ben McFarland. Ben is the Chief Resilience Officer for the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, the regional planning organization for Southeastern Virginia. He received a BA in Economics and a Master's of Urban and Environmental Planning from the University of Virginia. He is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and a Certified Floodplain Manager. Ben will provide a 15-minute case study from the HRPDC. Please start your screen share and get started when you're ready, Ben.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I'll go ahead, get the slides pulled up. As Nicole said, my name is Ben McFarland. I'm the Chief Resilience Officer of the Hampton Roads PDC. We're the planning organization for all of Southeastern Virginia. So if you're from around here, you may have come across our paths at some point. And if not, this is us. So we're the Norfolk Virginia Beach, Newport News, soon to be renamed the Norfolk or the Virginia Beach Chesapeake Norfolk MSA for the most part. But our job is to work with all of our member localities, our 17 jurisdictions, to support planning of a greater than local significance, working on a variety of issues. And for us, resilience, sea level rise, climate adaptation is a big part of our work program. We have a number of different coastal communities that are quite vulnerable to flooding. And so understanding kind of what our vulnerability is, where that vulnerability is coming from, and what it looks like now, and how that compares to what it looks like in the future is critical. And I think the role that NASA data and tools play in helping us to better understand that, it's a vital role. That the tools, the data, the equipment, the technical capacity that NASA provides through its different programs gives us a better understanding of what the extent of sea level rise is going to be, how that's going to impact flooding, where those areas are going to be flooded, why these events are occurring, and when we really need to start acting on how we're going to plan to actually adapt and change and deal with our challenges of sea level rise and other climate change impacts. So for us, this is not just a future issue, it's a current issue. These are all pictures that have been taken over the last 15 to 20 years of flooding that's occurred in Hampton Roads from a variety of different issues, whether it's a major storm event, a high tide, or a massive rainfall event, or even just a small combination of any of those impacts. That flooding is happening regularly here in Hampton Roads, and getting a better understanding of why that's occurring is really important for our communities to be able to successfully adapt, and not only when we're talking about public infrastructure, but also the actions and the decisions of private actors as well. So forgive me for anybody here that is well versed in some of these issues of sea level rise, but I really wanted to kind of start out at the high level and talk about how we're taking all the different tools that are out there and trying to fit them all together. And so for us, it's important to understand kind of why sea level is actually changing, why it's rising here in Hampton Roads, and understanding why that's occurring helps us to, as planners, as decision makers at the local level, identify what our options are and choose, what the best courses of actions are. And so when we're thinking about the higher level or the global causes of sea level rise, it really boils down to two things. One, we have ice that's melting, it's on land. You may have seen some of the commentary where they'll show ice melting in a glass of water or something, and how it doesn't change anything. But we're talking about ice, that extra ice you're adding to the glass. And then thermal expansion. As the water warms up, it expands and adds to the volume. So these are the kind of the bigger large scale issues that we're dealing with. And then at the regional level, which I think is really where some of the NASA tools come into play, is this better and better understanding that we're getting of these other impacts that are occurring, right? So we have not just ice melting and adding to the amount of water that we're dealing with, but also that as ice from the poles melts, that it changes the gravitational forces that are acting upon the world's oceans, and it redistributes that water over the course, over the entire globe. We have issues with ocean circulation, changing patterns due to changing temperatures or changing salinity in different parts of the oceans, causing some pretty significant impacts here in Hampton Roads and other areas along the Mid-Atlantic, among other areas across the world. And then, one thing that we're very familiar with here in Hampton Roads is vertical land movement. So from a variety of different specific causes, but knowing that the ground is actually going up and down locally, and being able to factor that in to what our projections are that we're using when we're planning for sea level rise. So why does this matter? Well, if we don't understand why it's happening or how much it's happening, and how these different parts kind of play together in this giant sandbox, it makes it really hard for us to develop an effective response. Some of these drivers are they can actually be managed. We can do something about them. So for example, right now we have pretty significant groundwater withdrawals from our deep water aquifers here in Eastern Virginia. Slowing down or eliminating those withdrawals could have an impact on the amount of subsidence that's actually occurring in our region. Other ones are, they're kind of small or relatively small to each other, so we can kind of ignore them. Doesn't mean that they're not important. It just means that they're not as important as others. And so, for example, there may be in certain areas land compaction from large structures or other heavy objects on the surface. And so if that's happening, then it's probably not happening a lot here because of the ways our soils are what they're composed of and the types of soils we have here in our region. And so while that may be important for a neighborhood or a specific structure, it's not necessarily as important for our large scale planning efforts. And then some of them are relatively constant while others are changing. So for example, we know that we're dealing with glacial isostatic adjustment as a result of the last the retreat of the glaciers from the last ice age, but it's not changing that fast, and so it's relatively a constant. Whereas the concern about changing ocean currents and other dynamical impacts on sea level rise, that's something that we are more concerned about because it is increasing, it's accelerating, and so getting a better handle on that is going to be critical for helping us to figure out exactly what we're dealing with when it comes to long-term sea level rise. So for the most part, our understanding of sea level rise comes from the tide gauge record. We're fortunate here in Hampton Roads that we have a tide gauge at Sewell's Point that's in Norfolk that is 95 or so years old at this point. So it's been around for a long time. We have a very long record. That's both a blessing and a curse sometimes, depending on how you interpret the data. But the key issue here is that for us and for all the other places that have these tide gauges, that while it gives us a trend, it only gives us a trend for that one spot. And so it can be hard. And even if we look at the tide gauges that are available for the entire East Coast of the United States, it only gives us that information for those specific places and along the shore. It doesn't really tell us, what is happening offshore. It doesn't tell us what's happening in areas that don't actually have this type of equipment installed. And so, while it's great to have, and it's a key data point for us to understand what is happening when it comes to sea level rise, it doesn't tell us the whole picture. And that's, I think, one of the key things, the advantages of working with NASA and taking advantage of these tools, these satellites that they've launched, and they've been tracking different things over the last several decades, that really helps us to get a better understanding of what's going on worldwide. And in this case, this graphic here shows sea level change measurements from the PAPAX JSON. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. Record from 1992 to 2014. Between the blue areas, the dark blue, are areas where there's been over that time period a drop of 7 centimeters in sea level, whereas the red areas show an increase in 7 centimeters. So the takeaway from this one is it's a few things. One is that we have a record now that spans the entire globe and not just at the location of those tide gauges. But two, it reinforces what we've been seeing at the shore. And so we get this kind of redundance in our data sources, this backup where we have sensors on the land and the sensors that are looking out at sea telling us the same story, which is critical for developing public support, for making sure that our decision makers, that we don't have different types of sensors telling us different things altogether. And so, having this record now moving forward, this is only going to make it that much more that our understanding of what's happening with sea level is going to be that much better because we'll have these two records that are now working in concert with each other. And similarly, one of the things, the advantages of having this NASA tools, and this is from the GRACE satellite or GRACE FO, gravimetry measurements, that these are things that we really couldn't measure if we didn't have this kind of equipment up in space. And so, for us, getting a better understanding of why sea level rises or why sea level rise is occurring, why sea level is changing in different parts of the globe in different ways or in different amounts, right? So we know by measuring land subsidence that different parts of the United States are rising and falling, in terms of the land is going up and down. But getting a better understanding through these measurements of mass and the distribution of mass across the globe really can tell us kind of what's happening now, why it's happening now, and what's going to happen in the future if these trends continue. And I think, this, for example, having these measurements here has been critical for us to take the global sea level scenarios that have been developed with the IPCC and with the U.S. Global Change Research Program, and to start to downscale those to the regional level, where we can now get a sense of how Hampton Roads is going to be affected by ice melt at Antarctica versus ice melt at, in Greenland. And knowing kind of why that's happening is going to be really important for us moving forward, because we're always going to be monitoring what's actually happening at the poles. So if we start to see different trends in different parts of the globe, we'll have a better idea of how that will kind of push our projections in a different direction. And so this is just one example of how we're able to use that information. We go from having these global scenarios to having a regionalized scenario developed with NASA tools and others. And then we are able to take the global curves that are developed, the different sea level scenarios, and modify those to account for all of these different regional effects that we're seeing. And so this slide here just shows our regional projections of sea level rise that we've adopted here in Hampton Roads. The horizontal lines are just the planning horizons that we're using, but those curves have all been adjusted to account for those different sea level, the different regional impacts that we're seeing from sea level trends, from both the on-land measurements at the different tide gauges, and also with the satellite measurements that we're seeing from the various equipment and the programs that NASA has put out there. So another example of this work, the things that we're trying to look at here in Hampton Roads that we need to be paying attention to, vertical land movement is critical for us. We know it's happening. It's not a lot, but it is. It's important for us. And really for us, understanding kind of what's going on in terms of vertical land movement and how that can be changed or not changed really could add or take away several decades in terms of our timeline for when we need to start adapting to sea level rise. And so understanding why this is occurring, measuring how much is occurring, and then being able to factor that into our public policy decisions. That's another, just one more thing that we had to be thinking about when it comes to planning for future conditions. And so when we're thinking of vertical land movement here in Hampton Roads, I mentioned soil compaction earlier. We have tectonic land movement. These two aren't as big for us. They are more significant for other parts of the United States. But for us, the two big ones are resource extraction, and for us, that's groundwater withdrawals. In other parts of the country, you have oil and natural gas extraction that can result in some significant subsidence as a result of either aquifer compaction or subsurface compression. And then again, glacial isostatic adjustment. As the glaciers continue to recede to the north, Hampton Roads, which was, we weren't under the bulge, but we were to the south of it. And so we were being kind of pushed up. But now as that glacier recedes, we're slowly coming back down. And so at some point, we'll get to the point where we're in an equilibrium again. But for now, it's very slow. It's probably somewhere in the range of like about 1 to 2 millimeters per year of this GIA land movement. But it's something that we need to be able to take into account. And so, as we have with, the sensors for sea level change, we have a similar kind of program and setup for looking at vertical land movement. This here is a diagram of an extensometer. This is an extremely precise tool that measures the change in elevation between a point on the surface and a point on the bedrock, which really can tell us how much and if there's compression going on below the land surface. We also use geodetic leveling and benchmarking to get a better understanding of kind of what the regional picture looks like. And we've moved from using traditional surveying techniques to using GPS or global navigation satellite data. And this is a program that we're working on right now with the USGS to get a better understanding of kind of what's going on at the surface here in Hampton Roads. But globally, and again, this is where the NASA data really kind of helps us to get that bigger picture. This INSAR data that's been kind of recently released and is getting better and more complete record over time really gives us that larger picture. And again, reinforces what we already are observing at individual points where we have those points, but also expands where we actually have data for. And so it fills in those gaps, whereas we were still relying on those individual points, we would not have as good or as large of a record. And so when we look at that in concert with data about water level decreases, looking at the water table, for example, we get a sense of why vertical land movement may be happening, and then what our potential responses might be for that. So, some takeaways. One, generally our record or our observations consist of point-based data, which is great. It's super accurate, but interpolating between that to really see what's going on at the larger scale is a challenge. The satellite data really helps us to address those limitations, but they do have their own limitations, right? There are certain issues with accuracy, availability, ability to process the data. So really what we're looking at and what we're trying to promote and look at and try to encourage our partners to think about is how do we best integrate these different data sets to the point where we actually have a complete picture that is accurate enough, it's widespread enough, and it's precise enough to really inform local and regional decision making when it comes to climate change adaptation. So that's all I have for this morning. Again, thank you very much, and I'd be happy to take any questions either now or later on. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us today, Ben. If you would unshare your screen, we have time for questions. If you could either unmute yourself to ask those or place those in the chat, we will monitor the chat to make sure that we get to those. While you think of questions, I would like to introduce our reflection activity. So we're going to have 5 minutes for these questions and the reflection activity combined. Blake is sharing the link with you in the chat for that. And what that looks like, I'll just show you, similar to last week, is we have our presenters listed here. And in order to add to this, you just double click anywhere and it will bring up a comment box for you. And you can publish that so that we can hear what you think about Ben's presentation.
Hey, Ben, I don't know if I'll break the ice on a little question. It's George here. So in your experience, you're the Chief Resilience Officer, formerly planner, with years of experience doing work in the flooding resilience field. How do you see the role of cooperation between these different, we have these different big agencies like NOAA, NASA, and FEMA, and others that deal with issues related to flooding? What is your viewpoint of the intersection of those agencies, at least in the United States, and how they work to drive, to support your work?
Well, that's a good question. I think that there are kind of success stories, and I think there are some, again, failure might be too strong of a word, but some areas where we could certainly do better. I think the interagency sea level rise team. I think it's got NOAA, USGS, and the Corps and NASA that are all part of that last publication that was put out for the U.S. regional and global sea level rise scenarios. I think that came out early last year. Being able to kind of bring all those different tools and the data sets and the researchers together, that's been, I think, a resounding success, and it's really led to, I think, a better understanding at the technical level of all these different things that are playing a role in sea level rise trends, right? And understanding what's going on and why it's going on. And so if you were to look at the progression of the curves, so the scenarios that we're using from 2012 to 2017 to 2022, they're getting better and better and better. And the picture is getting clearer about, what's actually happening out there. So that's been a success. I think when it comes to really doing anything with that information, that's where the challenge is, right? And so, for example, I think we've seen a lot of flooding, in the news lately over the last year. There have been a lot of major rain events. Our flood insurance or flood risk mapping has not really kept up with the state of the science when it comes to understanding kind of what the drivers of flooding are and what the kind of, how that should be reflected in our data or our risk products that help inform not just large scale public decision making, but also just individuals making decisions about, where to live, what to build, et cetera. And so, there are still lots of opportunities there. I think, when some of the things that we're working on right now, with this vertical land movement thing in particular is, we're trying to have a conversation with our partners at USGS and with some folks at the NASA JPL and with, ODU and other partners that have worked on the NSAR side of things with, the folks that are working on this benchmarking effort that we're looking at and saying, how do we reinforce each other, right? We know there are issues with the accuracy of the NSAR. When we're talking about 2 millimeters, we don't have a lot of subsidence here at Hampton Roads. So it's not a huge issue for us, but it's important. But we want to be able to kind of reinforce what's going on, right? And so I think having those conversations, there's really no, I feel I'm dragging on here, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of incentive to get together and work together. So that has been a challenge.
Well, you kind of hit on a question that was in chat too, and it was asked, do you know of some resources which might be useful for looking at land subsidence issue? And so I think you sort of covered that, but you could hit the nail on the head if you want to.
Yeah, sure. So there was a data product with the NSAR data that's been recently put out, and I don't have the link on me, and I don't know who to credit for it, so I won't. But so that data, that's the satellite data that's that's been made available, and then the project we're working with on the USGS, there's a circular they put out several years ago about land subsidence in the Chesapeake Bay. That was kind of an overview of kind of what was out there. It's about 10 years old now. And then more recently, we've been working with them on this benchmarking effort, and that data is also now on the public kind of record. So I can follow up with that with George and Nicole and send you those links because the data's there. If anybody wants to play around with it. We haven't really had a chance to do it internally ourselves, but it's out there.
I just posted a link just to generally cover SAR and NSAR in the chat, but we'll follow up with folks with a little more detail if they ask for it.
All right. I want to thank Ben again for his time, and I want to thank you all for commenting both in our reflection activity document and for your questions that you asked here. If you have any unanswered questions that we weren't able to get to, you can put those in the participant guide, and we will share those with Ben later to get you some follow-up answers. But up next, I have Dr. Dick Zimmerman from ODU's Ocean and Earth Science Department. Dr. Zimmerman is also a biological oceanographer with nearly 4 decades of experience in experimental plant physiology.
We just for a second, can we have folks mute their mics because we're getting a little feedback. Go ahead, Nicole.
Right. With primary productivity of coastal ecosystems, aquatic optics, and instrument development for ocean observation. Dr. Zimmerman is going to spend 15 minutes sharing information about using planet satellite data for seagrass research and how those data may be accessed via the NASA Commercial Small Set Data Acquisition Program. Dr. Zimmerman, if you would please start your screen share and go ahead and give your presentation when you're ready. We've muted him now.
Yeah, Dick, we'll get you.
There you go.
Yeah,
Can
we
you
got
hear
you.
me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, good. All right, now, so let me start screen share. Can you see it?
No.
Oh, there. Wrong button.
Yes.
Okay, so, all right, so we're going to be talking about some work we've been doing to address issues related to water quality and the health of the Chesapeake Bay. We've been looking at using NASA assets, especially the Small Satellite Data Buy program, to assess the distribution and abundance of submerged aquatic vegetation in the Chesapeake Bay, and more recently, some work that a student in our lab has been doing on harmful algal blooms. So the work I'll be talking about today is a combined effort, Victoria Hill and myself, as well as students, Kylie Harrison and Marie LePere. And I want to acknowledge our colleagues who have helped us with some of the machine learning and other aspects of the work, and especially Brooke Landry and Peter Tango, who have taken the lead in trying to push the technology that we've been developing into the Chesapeake Bay program's annual assessment of SAV abundance. And of course, all this work has been funded by NASA through the Ocean Biology and Biogeochemistry program, and especially the SOLS satellite program. So just a bit of a background here is that we've been monitoring submerged aquatic vegetation in the Chesapeake Bay for about 40 years now. And the folks at VIMS that have been doing this been providing one of the longest continuous records of SAV distribution in abundance anywhere in the world. And these data are critically important for managing and science activities throughout the Chesapeake Bay. The map on the left shows all of the images that they collect, and you can see it covers the entire coastal region of the Chesapeake Bay and the coastal lagoons. The plot on the right shows the temporal pattern of SAV abundance going back to about 1978, and this was initiated primarily because in the 1970s there was a huge die-off of SAV and people were concerned about it. So we've been continuing to monitor this to see if SAV populations have been improving in response to efforts to improve water quality. And you can see that generally there's been an upward trend, although there have been a lot of ups and downs. Okay, the traditional survey methods face a number of challenges. First of all, there's the problem of frequency and scale of the aerial and ground-based surveys is limited by operational costs, by logistic complexity in coordinating both ground operations and aircraft operations. They have been extremely labor intensive in the way they've been doing this. And this involves ground support and scheduling for the aircraft surveys, as well as manual photo interpretation. It's often, and this is for SAV, and for the harmful algal blooms, it's often difficult to predict when and where to survey for HABs. So using aircraft as a survey tool isn't really very practical. Furthermore, the uncalibrated digital photographs that you get from the aerial surveys are not amenable to automation or retrieval of absolute abundances. Or more importantly, what we're trying to push for is to provide estimates to quantify biomass and get at things like blue carbon. The non-commercial satellites that have been put up by NASA and other government agencies, such as MODIS, VIIRS, Landsat, and Sentinel, provide less than optimal spatial resolution. The best you can get is about 10 meters. A lot of them are around 1 kilometer, which is too coarse for really good identifying of submerged aquatic vegetation or harmful algal blooms in the small tributaries surround the Chesapeake Bay. And furthermore, their low frequency of coverage limits their utility for detecting these things in dynamic estuaries, because you want to be able to see it when it happens. And every 10 days to 2 weeks is not very frequent, especially given that the extensive cloud cover in this area really means that you get a practical image maybe once a month if you're lucky. So we've been exploring the opportunity of using the small commercial satellite program that NASA has been supporting. And we've been focusing on the satellite program operated by Planet Labs, which has now got over 200 CubeSats flying in orbit at the moment. These satellites provide 8 spectral color bands. They provide 3-meter ground resolution at nadir. They are radiometrically calibrated. They're providing now an atmospherically corrected product. And the satellites, the CubeSats themselves, the 200 CubeSats, are all harmonized to the ESA Sentinel satellite, which means we're using an extensively calibrated satellite put up by the European Space Agency to serve as a vicarious calibration for all of the 200 CubeSats, which means it reduces the CubeSat to CubeSat variability that people had complained about in some of the earlier imagery. Furthermore, we're getting daily coverage of the entire coastal zone, which eliminates the tasking logistics. We don't have to schedule an aircraft to fly. We don't have to worry about whether today is cloudy or the tide is wrong or the winds are blowing or whatever, because if we don't get a good image today, the satellite will pick up another image tomorrow and we can pick through this thing. So we've been exploring the utility of these satellites to replace or at least augment the aerial surveys. Also to determine if they are sufficiently well calibrated to use to automate the classification process. And if we can do that, can we generate quantitative data for estimating blue carbon and biogeochemical processes? These Planet Lab data are freely available, being made freely available by Planet Labs for research activities. And you can just go to the Planet website and to sign up for this. To get access to the data, you need to be careful of a couple things. Free access is provided for research purposes only. Planet is a private for-profit corporation, and they do want to sell their imagery. So your account cannot be used to generate operational products, but for commercial or for research products, they're very generous about providing access. It's important to note that Planet retains proprietary rights to the image data. You may not distribute or share the image download files with anyone else, but you can share the layers you generate, and you can share RG pictures of the satellite and publish them. Planet just wants an acknowledgement in the publication. You can use this website to create an account and access the data, and you can sign up for an education and research account, which gives you about 5,000 square kilometers a month. The online form is easy. They don't need very much information. The account is good for at least a year with a renewal, and it takes about 2 weeks to activate it. If you're at an academic institution and funded by a federal agency, you can apply for access via NASA's Commercial Small Satellite Data Acquisition Program, CSDA. This gives you larger allocation compared to the education and research account, but they put a 30-day embargo on the imagery. That is not true with the education and research account. With the education and research account, you can see imagery that were collected yesterday. With the NASA Commercial Satellite Data Acquisition Program, there's a 30-day latency on access to the imagery, but you get more imagery. And if you work for a non-academic federal state agency, you should talk to the CSDA program about access. Usually they can give you access. So just to show you what we've been doing with this, we've been exploring 4 different regimes in the Chesapeake Bay to map submerged aquatic vegetation. We've been looking up in the highly turbid oligohaline upper sections of the bay characterized by Susquehanna Flats and the Chester River, where we have extensive populations of submerged aquatic vegetation, some in small variable patches with high degree of turbidity in that water. We've been looking down in the moderately turbid mesohaline central part of the bay and the polyhaline York River, and finally out in the coastal lagoons to get a gradient across here to see what these satellite systems can do in these very different environments. We're combining a convolutional neural network with our physics-based model of SAV canopy reflectance to classify and quantify the SAV in these complex coastal waters. So we obtain the atmospherically corrected image from Planet, and then we select training data for machine learning classification, and then we classify them into dry land, bare sand, submerged bare sand, marsh, and optically deep water, and submerged aquatic vegetation. And then once we've classified the submerged aquatic vegetation, we use our physics-based approach to get to absolute abundance in terms of leaf area index and blue carbon. And once we have trained the model adequately, we can go directly from the atmospherically corrected image to the classification in an automated fashion without having to do further training. And that's where we're working now, is to see whether we can develop a single model that is adequately trained to cover the entire bay, or whether we have to develop regional models that have to be applied locally. So just to give you an example of some of the things we've been doing, here is an RGB rendering of a Planet image of an extensive seagrass meadow in South Bay in the outer coastal lagoon. This is what our classification result looks like from this image. The colors represent the different classes that we have picked out. The green is the seagrass class that we're particularly interested in. The other classes are all there. You get this as sort of a byproduct of it, although our work is focused on the SAV. And what you can see is that our SAV classifications agree very well with the VIMS percent cover classes that were produced for this location during the same year. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that VIMS gets one image of the entire bay per year. The satellite imagery providing much more frequent estimates that allow us to develop monthly patterns. And you can see on this plot, all the blue dots represent images that we have processed of this Eastern Shore region to area And in comparison to that, you see the VIMS polygons that have been produced once a year. And I will add that the 2022 data are still not finalized, and the 2023 data produced by the aerial imagery won't be available for at least another year. We can do this within a few minutes of receiving the imagery. So once the things become automated, the whole process becomes a lot faster. And we have a lot more data to start looking at intra-annual patterns throughout the whole thing. We then use the brightness in the pixels that we've identified as submerged aquatic vegetation in our physics-based model to retrieve leaf area index, which is an absolute measure of plant biomass that we can then turn into carbon. So now we are going not from just rough estimates of percent cover, but we're actually getting to shoot densities and carbon biomass that can be used in biogeochemical models. And from that, we can get estimates of total above ground carbon as well. So we can start to do carbon budget modeling from the satellite imagery. Just to quickly go through a couple of other areas. We've applied the same things to other locations. Here's the Goodwin Islands National Estuarine and Research Reserve in the lower Chesapeake Bay. And you can see the VIMS polygons on the left, our classification map in the center, and the leaf area index estimates that we've calculated from that. Basically, these SAV meadows are much smaller and less dense than offshore. There's only about 1 kilometer of SAV in this region, and correspondingly, there's standing plant biomass is much less. But again, you can see over a 2-year period, oh, this is a 1-year period, we're getting more than 1 image a month to be able to analyze these patterns. And then go to the far north in Susquehanna Flats, where we see a dramatic seasonal variation in abundance due to the fact that in the wintertime, most of the submerged aquatic vegetation is scoured off, dies off, and is scoured off the shoals. In January, you can see what the pattern looks like. There's patchy seagrass SAV abundance throughout this area, as opposed to August, when not only is the entire flats fully vegetated, but also the shallow areas along the shoreline are also completely vegetated. And you can see in our data, we pick up this dramatic seasonal fluctuation in SAV abundance throughout these regions that the annual aerial imagery provided by the VIMS SAV mapping team just can't reproduce. So we're starting to see large seasonal patterns. We can find stable environments in the lower bay and seasonally much more dynamic environments in the upper regions of the freshwater basin. We can start to distinguish how these SAV populations are behaving in different locations. Now I want to shift gears and talk for the next couple of minutes about one of the things we've been doing more recently with this is that we've discovered in doing our SAV mapping that we can quantify algal blooms using the daily planet imagery. If I can get this to run, I don't know if you can see the insert. We can show a series of images. This just shows a little video map of the Can you see that video running? No? Okay. Then never mind. We'll move on. If you just want to take a link, we created a little video showing a time series of the red tide evolution in the York River. Just click on this link and it should take you right to it and you can watch it. So here's an image of the river that was collected in 2022. This is August 26th. And all this dark ribbons represent an extensive bloom of Margoliphidium polychiroides, a dinoflagellate that characteristically inhabits a lot of our coastal estuaries in the summertime around here. We've been able to quantify that using a normalized difference chlorophyll index, which takes advantage of the red bands provided by Planet to look at chlorophyll concentrations in high density areas. Here's a map showing the normalized difference chlorophyll index of that bloom plotted throughout the York River. And we can get to absolute chlorophyll from this. And if you look at a chlorophyll map here, you see now we can actually get from the imagery the chlorophyll maps. Now, the interesting thing to note is that this is right at the basically the Virginia Institute of Marine Science is located right here at the base of the bridge. And they have a sensor located here and they have another for monitoring HABs, and they have another sensor located out here at the Goodwin Islands for monitoring HABs. What we see in the imagery very often is that the blooms don't go anywhere near the shore-based or the in situ sensors, and so they'll very often miss the presence of the bloom simply because they're not looking in the right place. With the satellite imagery, we can now map these things to extensive detail, and we're getting chlorophyll concentrations that are consistent with what survey vessels going out and sampling the blooms have demonstrated. And we can now use this technology to map the timing and the density of the blooms. We can calculate total chlorophyll concentrations in the blooms, which we can convert to carbon and other things. We can also estimate the area from this. So this new generation of satellites is greatly improving our ability to assess both submerged aquatic vegetation and HABs, and you can probably think of a variety of other applications for this technology as well. The important thing is that we get daily image acquisition, which eliminates the logistic problems associated with satellite tasking, enables time series observations that wouldn't be possible otherwise, and it reveals important seasonal patterns in SAV and HAB abundance that we can't get from any other resource. And the fact that these images are radiometrically calibrated and atmospherically corrected means that we have an opportunity to develop train automated machine learning algorithms to perform this across time and space, which greatly reduces the labor involved in processing the information, and we get quantitative retrieval of these products. And the rapidly improving coverage by these satellites means this technology can be scaled to other coastal locations and other problems that one might want to address. And I think that's it. Yes. Oh, and we now have a semi-automated workflow for image processing and blue carbon estimation that can facilitate this mapping. And we've provided a couple of workshops for people to actually be trained in this technology if you're interested in it. And that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Zimmerman. And you already have a question in the chat. The question is...
Okay, let me stop sharing. Go ahead.
What exactly are you defining as water quality in your model? Turbidity, algae blooms?
All of the above, yes. Water quality, in our case, we're interested in retrieving estimates of transparency from this imagery, water transparency, which is affected by chlorophyll concentrations in the water, phytoplankton abundance in the water, suspended sediments, and color dissolved organic matter. And by analyzing the reflectance measured by the satellites in 8 bands of color, we can use algorithms that others have developed through NASA support and other things for a variety of other satellites to apply to these data. The advantage that these satellites provide is not that they're giving us new bands in different colors. They're actually matching the bands in the MODIS, VIIRS, and Sentinel satellites, but which means we can use their algorithms that were developed for large-scale processes to now start to investigate the things on the scales of the York River, coastal lagoons, and inland portions of the Chesapeake Bay, much closer to where we care about in terms of impact on human activities.
Thank you. And before we get to your next question in the chat, I want to direct our participants to our reflection activity. Blake has already posted the link for that reflection activity in the chat. So if you will please, like you have for the other presenters, open that up and provide your comments on Dr. Zimmerman's presentation. I see some of you are already in here. So thank you for going in this direction. Now, we are not forgetting this question that is in the chat. It says, up to which water depth can you measure SAV? You have muted yourself.
Dick, I think we had you muted again.
Yeah, the depth to which we can measure SAV depends obviously on the transparency of the water. The interesting thing is that submerged aquatic vegetation have very high light requirements for survival, which just so happens to correspond to about the depth of visibility in the water. In other words, this what we call the Secchi depth, the depth to which you can see a Secchi disk dropped into the water. And that is also the depth to which the satellites can see into the water as well. So in the case of submerged aquatic vegetation, these vascular plants that live in aquatic environments, turns out that the satellites range of detection is just about equivalent to the ability of the vegetation to inhabit the space. So if the water gets clearer, the vegetation can grow deeper, but we should be able to see them at least down to several meters of depth in the water. And if you get into really clear waters, we can see them in places like the Bahamas. We can identify submerged aquatic vegetation to depths of 10 meters or more. Around here in the Chesapeake Bay, it's about 1 to 2 meters.
Thank you. Do we have any additional questions for Dr. Zimmerman?
May I ask the question verbally? Yes. So I was the one asking about the depth. So, but you showed us a map where you see that you see blooming algae in the center of the river and not on the side. And how do you know if you see no algae because there is none, or because you don't see the bottom? And
yeah, we'll have to unmute again, Dick. Yeah, there you go. Dick, we muted you again. There was some feedback from your mic, so you'll have to unmute.
Okay, these are phytoplankton, not submerged aquatic plants, rooted submerged aquatic plants. They're microscopic cells, and when they bloom in large quantities. And what you see here is that these algal blooms are basically going with the flow of the river, and so they're essentially in the mainstream of the river. And these dinoflagellates are motile, so they swim to the surface, what creates very high concentrations that these algae grow to. They grow to much higher concentrations than random drifting phytoplankton will occur, and they aggregate near the surface during the daytime. And so what you see here is the surface aggregation of these motile phytoplankton that are swimming toward the surface in extremely high concentrations. And so that's why they're in the center of the river. And we don't really know why they're not on this more effectively distributed along the shoreline, except what we see here is that this is the pattern of flow in the river itself. And it's the river that's pushing them around like this, up and down. And so partly what you're seeing is the effects of the flow patterns in the river itself.
Dr. Zimmerman, you have another question in the chat. It is, to measure blue carbon, would you combine the above ground biomass calculations using this data you mentioned with estimates of below ground biomass to get a full picture of blue carbon?
Yes.
Is your goal for above ground
Yes.
biomass?
Well, above ground biomass is what we measure, what we can quantify. Now, to get to below ground biomass, you have to make some assumptions about the ratio of roots to shoots on the plants. And you also have to make some assumptions about the extent to which the plants themselves promote the burial of allochthonous carbon, that is carbon, phytoplankton carbon, and other carbon that wasn't necessarily produced locally in situ. And that becomes a more challenging problem. First of all, it's not directly amenable to remote sensing because we can't detect it. So what we have to do to get estimates of total carbon burial, if you want that, is to go out and sample and do local correlations between how much above ground biomass is there, how much below ground biomass there is. And what we're finding is that that's highly variable across the domain of submerged aquatic vegetation species. It depends upon the species you're looking at, it depends upon the location you're looking at, and it's fraught with you can always come up with a number, but it's fraught with a high degree of uncertainty because of all those variables.
Thank you. And I want to thank
But it
you
can
for
be done.
presenting with us, for answering these questions. Thank you everyone for your questions and for adding to our reflection activity. We do have a 5-minute break scheduled at this time. So we will see you back at 11:03 from your break.
Thanks again, Dick. Appreciate it. I think we've got you muted, but I
Hey,
appreciate
George, my pleasure. So I'm free to go now, right?
You're welcome to stay, but you're also free to go.
I've got to take care of a couple of other things. I'd love to stay, but I've got to sign off. My pleasure. See you guys. Oh, and just tell them to, if they want to get access to the imagery, to just go ahead and follow the links and create an account. And the Planet interface is really, really easy to use. It'll take them about 5 minutes to figure it out.
Will do. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. So long.
Yeah, Planet has easy integration into Arc Pro. If you happen to already subscribe to that service. Cedric, for are you still there?
Hello, Blake. Is it okay as a student to excuse myself for a few minutes to go get a test that I couldn't reschedule done? Um, I'm a student at Virginia Tech, a graduate student, and I have this test that I can't reschedule.
So I think if I understand you right, Randy, you got a test coming up.
Yeah, in a few minutes that I can't reschedule. Last week, I was able to make it on Monday, but on Tuesday I had a 3-day interview with Esri, so I couldn't make it as well. I am so sorry, like I'm so apologetic. I don't know what to do. But to speak to you guys, I'm sure you guys would understand. And I have a test as well. I found out that you guys gave an assignment last week on Tuesday, and if I can definitely come back after my test at 12:05 and rejoin the call, if that's okay, and just so I can also catch up with whatever assignments I can definitely work on the assignment and get it done tonight if I can submit it tomorrow. But tomorrow I would have time to join the class fully. But if I can be excused for about an hour to go get the test done and then return.
Yeah, it's total, test takes precedent, and congratulations on the interview. I hope you get some good news on that front, and I'm pretty sure the PowerPoint materials from these will be out there. And I think Nicole was shaking her head yes, that you could turn in the homework later if you so desire. That's totally fine. You focus on that test. And you're feel free to come back and join when you're ready. It's no problem.
And we do end at 12:30 today. So
Mhm.
if you're done after that, then just join us tomorrow and we'll look forward to having you then.
Yep.
Well, my test will be done by 12:05, and so I can rejoin afterwards just so that I don't miss anything as well. If that's okay.
Yep, that's fine. You do what you need to do, and we will see you tomorrow, and we will take your homework when you are done with it.
Okay, thank you so much.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
How to submit the assignments? Is that we are submitting at the end during our breakout rooms or something?
I'll leave that to Nicole or another expert here.
The assignments actually get emailed directly to Wendy Stout. So her email should be available in many of our follow-up emails that you were sent.
And I think Al from the Opera team is here. I just wondered, Al, if we want to test your audio and your ability to screen share before we get going.
Sure. Good morning. How do I
Good
sound?
morning. You sound great.
Great. And now let me I'll just share the screen, and how's that?
That looks great.
Do I'm gonna just leave on the title screen? Is that fine, or do you want to stop the share and then come back to it?
Nope, that's fine. Is Dr. Chen joining you?
I don't believe so. I think it's just me.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I want to welcome everyone back. I have 11:04, so hopefully you had a productive break. At this time, we have NASA's Opera team joining us to share a 30-minute presentation of their work. Our presenter is going to be Dr. Al Hadwiger, an assistant professor at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at Caltech and an assistant researcher for the Joint Institute for Regional Earth Systems Science and Engineering at UCLA. Al, if you would please start your screen share, which you've already done, and you can get started whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here this morning. And as the introduction mentioned, I'm going to be talking to you today about the Opera project. And so I will try to limit the use of acronyms. I apologize; they will trickle through this presentation, but please do ask for clarification if I start jumping straight to acronyms. But in any case, Opera is what we refer to as the observational products for end users from remote sensing analysis. And this is a relatively new project that is going to be providing lots of data that's free and open to anyone who is interested. And I will introduce the data products as well as let you know how you can access them today. Okay, here we go. So the background about Opera. So Opera is funded through NASA to create analysis-ready data products that directly address the needs of multiple U.S. federal agencies. And these needs were identified through a working group known as the Satellite Needs Working Group. This team of researchers and government employees meets every 2 years to interview federal agencies and try to identify solutions to their satellite data needs. As a result of one of these surveys, there were 3 different products that were selected that ultimately led to what became Opera. This is a surface water extent, surface displacement, and surface disturbance. I'm going to go through the details of these different products. I'm going to try to focus on the ones that I think are more relevant to coastal issues, but I will just briefly introduce all of them. And then I just want to mention that Opera really is a large collaborative project. So it's led by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory where I'm based, but we do have project partners from the USGS, NASA Goddard, University of Alaska Fairbanks, Southern Methodist University. We work with the EarthScope Consortium and the University of Maryland, specifically their GLAD group. So here's a overview of the Opera team. This is not even in the entire team. This is really just the team members who have sent in photos to us. So you can see we're a large group a large diverse group of scientists and engineers, computer systems people that all work together to create these analysis-ready data products. And now I'll spend some time going through the details of these products. So again, the three products that Opera was funded to create are the surface water extent, surface disturbance, and surface displacement. In NASA lingo, these are what are known as level 3 products. This simply means that they're ready for analysis. So they're already derived from the satellite data that they came from in a usable format that has a classification already attached to it. Along the way, we actually have to create level 2 products, and these 2 products we're also providing because they're useful for other applications. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them today, but just to briefly mention what they are, this is the radiometric terrain corrected SAR backscatter product and the co-registered single look complex product. And because we need these products to get to level 2 and because we know they're useful to people, we wanted to make all of it available. So I'm just going to kind of walk through the 3 main products that we're making, starting with the surface water extent product. Surface water extent, what it is it's essentially a geotiff that you can download or analyze in the cloud. And what it does is it maps surface water, and we map surface water using different input satellites. So this includes optical satellites. So that's and we're specifically using the harmonized Landsat Sentinel-2 satellite product. So this is a combination of optical imagery from 2 different satellites, the European Sentinel-2 and the US Landsat satellites, and they're harmonized into a single platform so that you really can increase the temporal frequency of the images because you're combining these different constellations. We're also going to be deriving water products from synthetic aperture radar or SAR imagery, and specifically the Sentinel-1 SAR and the future NISAR. NISAR is a NASA satellite, a joint NASA ISRO, the Indian Space Agency satellite system that's soon to be launched, and we really look forward to this new SAR platform coming on. The water extent product has a near global coverage, and so we define near global as all land masses excluding Antarctica, and so it's really large scope. By combining the information from all these different satellite platforms, the temporal resolution is every few days. The products will be produced at a 30-meter grid, so sort of a medium resolution, which is a compromise, for these large global scale maps. And then the product record begins at different times depending on the input satellites. And the reason that we did this is that we wanted to get the data available as quickly as possible. So we went with a staggered release plan. So starting in April 2023, the water product from the harmonized Landsat and Sentinel-2 has been made. And so, as you know, this is in the past now. So these data are already being processed and are available through the Physical Oceanography Distributed Data Archive Center, or known as PODAC. Follow the next of these products that will come. The next of this product suite that will come online is the Sentinel-1 based water map, and that's in July 2024, and then followed by NISAR in May 2025. And so with the water product, we're actually only going forward in time. So even though there are satellite data going back in time for many years, we are only funded to go forward through time in this case. And so these product records begin essentially when we turn the system on to operational mode, and that's reflected here. To show some examples of these data, we're going to first look at the surface water extent derived from the harmonized Landsat Sentinel-2 satellites. So these data are available on NASA Worldview, and this is just an animation here showing a time series of what the water product looks like. So really just trying to highlight here the global coverage and the very high temporal resolution, temporal sampling of this data. I've included QR codes throughout and links, and I believe these will all be available to you afterwards. But if we need to, I can point you to specific links later on. So now if we actually, connect this to some coastal processes, I have a zoom in here of the Indus Delta in Pakistan, just showing you what this water product looks like. So this is just a single snapshot in time of the Indus Delta. The colors here represent different things. So the white part of the map is just what we classify as not water. The blue is open surface water, and the light blue is partial surface water. So you can see, intricate distributary channel networks here. You can see open surface water channels. You can see partial surface water channels. And partial surface water is defined as a pixel that's between 50% to 100% water. So it can be a mixed pixel or a shoreline or a partially wetted pixel. An example of what you'll be able to access when the SAR data become available. So one of the things we're most excited about, and some of these topics have come up in the first two talks today, are the issue of cloud cover. And so the optical satellites have a challenge, which is that when it's cloudy, you can't see the ground. But SAR circumvents this issue because the radar can actually penetrate through clouds and see to the ground, and that's particularly important during things like flooding events when it's raining and we need imagery as quickly as possible, especially during the flood and not after the flood. So on the right here, you see two different surface water map products. On the left image is the one derived from optical data, so that you can see these gray patchiness, that's clouds. And in this case, I selected an image that still showed water. So here, this would be a sort of partial coverage. But if we use the SAR data, we essentially strip those clouds away and just are left with the water on the ground. The other things that the SAR data can provide that are of interest to coastal issues are inundated vegetation. So we're going to be, as I mentioned, we're going to be deriving these water maps from Sentinel-1, which is the currently flying European satellite that operates with a C-band radar wavelength. This satellite can provide information, and our water product will provide information on inundated vegetation and herbaceous wetlands. And then the soon-to-be launched NISAR satellite operates with a longer radar wavelength, so you can actually penetrate through more significant vegetation, and it will provide key information on water in all wetlands. And so this is something that will be really important for those looking in these densely vegetated coastal regions. And then I'm just going to show a few more examples of the water product and some ways that the Opera team has used these data to make flood maps. And so this is one of the first maps that we made in our internal team here, just as an example. And this is some flooding that was going on in Central California that was a result of a series of atmospheric river events in January 2023. And so on the map here, you can see the dark blue river channel. That is this. We took the water map and reconverted it into a flood type map, so we can see before and after events. It's not showing all the different water classes here. We merged them beforehand. So the dark blue channel just shows you the river extent before the atmospheric rivers, and the light blue shows you the river extent after the atmospheric rivers. So you can see the water spilling out here into the floodplain. And then tying into the previous talk, we sometimes use Planet Labs imagery which are much higher resolution, as a sort of way to check the quality of the data itself. And you can see there's very good agreement between the flooded area that you see in the Opera product versus just through the true color optical image of Planet. Another example of some flood mapping is from the 2022 monsoon flooding in Pakistan. This was a really catastrophic flooding event that led to the displacement of 33 million people, killed over 1,000 people, and submerged 50 villages. So you can see again a before and after type map of the water here. And so really really, really huge flooding event going all the way well outside the bounds of the pre-monsoon river here. And yeah, the opera data have been very, very useful for characterizing these flood events. I'm going to just briefly now touch on the surface disturbance product. I would say this is probably the least relevant to the coastal issues that we're covering here, but there is some relevance. So I just wanted to mention it briefly. So surface disturbance is really just defined as a vegetation change, and so or specifically a vegetation loss. This has the same coverage and temporal resolution as the water product, so it's near global with a temporal resolution of every few days and a 30-meter pixel resolution. This has been operational since February 2023, so these data are available now, and you can access these data through the Land Processes Distributed Data Archive Center. And we do have new scope to derive a product from SAR as well, although this is not yet fully planned. It's funded, and we'll have information on that in the near future. And just to show two brief examples of this, what this looks like. So on the right, you can see the global extent here in this Google map. We have two zoom-ins, one of forest fires in Quebec. So here, this color map is showing as things become redder, that means there's more significant vegetation loss. And so one of the primary uses of this product is tracking things like forest fires. But I also wanted to highlight a water issue that you can detect with this. So there was some erosion due to a major flooding event in early 2023 in New Zealand. And you can see here that the vegetation was actually stripped from the riverbanks. And so I think this type of analysis might be relevant to the coastal issues where you can get significant vegetation change and actually track these vegetation changes. And again, these data are available. And by the end of this presentation, I'll show you where you can actually access the data. And then finally, the surface displacement product. This ties into the first presentation from today. So this is an INSAR-based map of deformation. And we're going to be deriving these from both Sentinel-1 and NISAR. And so the more of the details of this, the coverage is North America. I'll show a map on the next page that will more clearly define this. It's not the entire North America as we normally define it, but what it is all the U.S. and the U.S. territories, Central America, and going 200 kilometers into Canada. And so, yeah, so it's not the entire, basically not the entire northern extent of Canada. The temporal resolution of this product will be 6, 12, or 24 days. This depends on the acquisitions from the satellites. It's a high spatial resolution of less than 30 meters. And different from the first two products, the record actually is going to go back to the full historical period, so we can make long time series of surface displacement. And so for Sentinel-1, that goes back to 2014. NISAR is TBD because it's not yet launched, but it will be sometime next year. And all of the radar data are actually available through the Alaska Satellite Facility DAC. I also want to mention that there's been as a result of this year's Satellite Need Working Group, there's a new notional product that was selected, and that's actually to take the displacement maps that we're going to be generating, which are only one-dimensional in the line of sight, and convert them into vertical and horizontal displacement products. This is not yet fully hashed out, but it is something to look forward to in the future. And so this map here shows the coverage in extent on the right of where we're going to be making these displacement products, and on the left is a cartoon showing you what you can sort of expect for the data, so you can get these different images through time. And if you were to say pick a pixel in this map and sum up the history of these images, you would be able to measure the complete time series history over the satellite record. And this is really relevant for applications like vertical land motion in coastal areas. And so here's an example from the Houston area. On the left, you can see these are vertical land motion derived velocity maps, where red colors here are corresponding to areas of more rapid subsidence. And then on the right, you can actually see the time series component of this with the comparison. So the red color showing the INSAR data and the gray showing GPS data. And so you can see there's really good agreement between what the GPS are measuring and what the INSAR will show. And just to mention again that these data will be available operationally starting in October 2024. So this is the final release of our series. And then if we carry on with this vertical land motion product, this is a notional product, as I mentioned, so it's been selected but not yet funded. We'll be actually taking all of the INSAR displacement maps and converting them into vertical rates and tying this into a GNSS network. And so this is a prototype for the whole state of California. On the left, you can see the vertical land motion. The signal that always really stands out is, of course, the Central Valley of California, which has been subsiding for many years as a result of groundwater withdrawal and agriculture. But this information will be available for all of the pixels in this map, and we are able to get down to quite low uncertainties in the millimeter per year range, lower millimeter per year range, and this will be really, really useful for looking at things like relative sea level rise in the coastal areas. And now I'm just going to switch to the final part of the presentation, which will just briefly go over how you can actually access and use these data. So the main way to access the most NASA Earth data are through the Earth Data Search interface. You may have already covered this previously, and I think some of your assignments also include this as well. We just, on the right here is a screenshot of a web browser for Earth Data Search. Just to provide some tips on how you can actually find the Opera data more easily. Of course, if you use the Opera keyword, it will actually pop up a project called SNWG, or Satellite Needs Working Group Opera. This will help find all of the Opera data, or you can use quotation marks to really help narrow down the search, the searching for Opera data products. And here on the right, you can see an example of the water product. And then you can download or analyze these in different ways. So you can do direct downloads. This is if you want to just get individual geotiffs. And I didn't have time to cover all the different layers, but each of these data products includes multiple layers, not just a single classification, but also we provide data that is useful for how we even derived the final product in the first place. And this is just an example for the disturbance product, where you can see there are many different layers here that you could download and analyze. You can also access these data through the AWS cloud and do all of your work right in the cloud. And then for the SAR-based products, the Alaska Satellite Facility actually has their own really nice data search interface called Vertex. The Opera data are not yet available through this, but this is something what you can imagine will look like in the near future. And so for the level 2 products that I mentioned, as well as the displacement product, all of that will be accessible through Vertex Search here. And then, as I showed earlier, we're also working with the Worldview system. And so currently only the water product is available in Worldview, but we're working to get the disturbance product into Worldview soon. And then eventually we will also have the displacement product. Worldview is really great because it allows you to visualize and even do some basic animations and comparisons just in your web browser. I use this myself all the time to make animations and to check on different events that I'm hearing about around the world. There's a link here for a video tutorial that Podak put together that really makes it even easier to find and analyze these data. And then Opera itself has we have our own resources and tools that we're providing. And so this is a screenshot of the Opera JPL webpage. If you go to the resources page, you'll see something like this, a link for code and repositories, as well as links to our partner organizations and their information. For our specific code and repositories, we use GitHub. Everything done with Opera is developed in the open. All of the data is open, even the algorithms and everything along the way is all open and available. And you can find them more easily through the Opera web page, which will point you in different directions. But the Opera science team has been working on a series of applications-based tools. So these are things that are more specific to the end users. We do this through Jupyter notebooks, and we've released already a series of them, more for the water product, including things like making flood maps. And so we'll point you to a specific example, but then you can, of course, modify your area of interest and use the same tools in different locations. And the final thing to mention is that we're also developing ArcGIS Pro Toolbox. And this is it's been prototyped, it's working well, it's not yet released to the public, where we need to work with JPL to get the prior approvals before we can release it. But this was developed through some internal funding at JPL, and right now it's just for the water product, but it will allow you to do everything just within the Arc interface. So you can download data right through ArcGIS Pro, and then you can do things like filter the data and even perform some temporal compositing, which can be really useful for helping to reduce the cloud cover of your area of interest. We'll have more information on this soon, but I expect within the next few months we'll have this ready to install into your ArcGIS Pro Toolbox. And then just to end here, please do, if you're interested in Opera and you want to stay informed, you can always reach out to me. I think my email will be available through this workshop. But also, please sign up for our mailing list. We have a stakeholder engagement program, which really seeks feedback from end users like you. So please do let us know how we're doing, and if there's anything we can help with, we'd be more than happy to. And that's all I have for today. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thank you, Al, for presenting on behalf of the whole Opera team today. We appreciate that. If you would please unshare your screen. We do have a few minutes for questions for you, and so we encourage our participants to either put those questions in the chat or unmute yourselves and go ahead and ask those verbally. While you think of questions, I need to remind you that we do have a reflection activity after each of our presentations. Blake has put the link for the reflection activity in the chat, so if you will please bring that page up and double click to input your comments on Al's presentation, we would appreciate that. All right, so I do see a question in the chat for you. Any plans for a QGIS plugin in the future?
Oh, yes, that's a great question. We don't have any specific plans currently, but I agree with that. That was a great idea, and that we should do that. So, yeah, it all depends on we have to do different things in order to make these plugins, but of course, this is something that should be done. Yeah.
Al, it's George here. I'll follow up with a little question about the potential vertical land motion product. I know folks in this area probably would have a lot of interest in that, and one of the first questions they might ask is there any indication yet of what the accuracy range might be on the resultant product?
So the accuracy for our INSAR products are in the millimeter per year type range. This will vary depending on location, because there's different data coverage in different locations, as you may know. And so we don't have the vertical land motion product fully worked out yet. So I don't want to give you a specific number, but that's kind of on the order that you could expect.
Yeah, thank you. That's just usually the first question when I mention any VLM product. It's like, okay, how close are we getting? If we're measuring sea level rise in inches or whatever, they always want to know how much of the data is signal and how much is noise, right?
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Al.
You do have another chat question. will you then have a vertical accuracy map after the vertical product is released?
So I can speak more generally about our approach. So we don't, because this is not a fully funded, finalized product yet, but what we do on Opera is that we validate our data before, as it's being developed, and so we quantify the uncertainty in a validation data set, and we do all of this in the open, and we release the validation database as well. So all of that information you can expect will come along with any of the Opera data products.
I do, can people hear me? I hope.
Yes.
It's good. I do have a quick question. So it's kind of interesting you developing this 3 product right now, and seems very important for any environmental study. But I'm just curious, when this team trying to determine what product they're going to do, what is the criteria behind that? It's like a voting system, so you decide to do these 3 products. And another question is, other than 3 products, and I know it's really cool to see there's more further extensions of each product. Did you guys thinking about creating another one, like the 4th data or 5th data, something related to something else?
Yeah, so the determination on which products are created come directly as a result of the Satellite Needs Working Group. This is this big interagency assessment where we're not Opera specifically, but members of the NASA, USGS, NOAA communities interview the federal agencies on what their satellite needs are, and then there's a determination to make data products that address the most needs. And so the 3 that we've developed were the result of these interviews, and how and which products would address the most U.S. federal agency satellite needs. And it's the same with the extension of these products as well. So it's if there's an additional need, like the SAR-based disturbance or the vertical land motion, these are results of new assessments based on what can we further do to address your satellite needs. And so that's the process, and then that comes back. But it can come back to Opera, and then we are funded to implement these products. That's how it works.
Thank you.
All right, Al, and I'm going to actually open this question up to the rest of the team in case you can chime in. This question was in the participant guide. It's a general question. Is there one place that charts/tables all possible products out there that NASA supports or has reviewed that says what it is, resolution, data type, RGB, multispec, LiDAR, etc., cost, etc.?
So that's a great question. I'm unaware of a single sort of higher level document that does all of them. What I know is that for the data centers that host these products, they all have their own web pages, sub-web pages that explain the details of them. Of course, we have our own website through Opera, the JPL website, that also provides this information. And so, yeah, there's a lot of data products out there through NASA. I think having a huge list is probably something people want and talk about, but I'm unaware of one currently.
All right. Thank you. And I want to thank you for your presentation again and for taking time to answer our questions today. If there are unanswered questions, we encourage our participants to put those in the participant guide, and we will get those to you so that you can answer those later should there be any follow-up questions. So we are going to be on to the exploration section of our workshop. All right. So for this, you're going to be in breakout rooms. In the interest of your reviewing the homework, we would like to take the first 5 minutes of the breakout rooms to capture your initial reflections in breakout sessions. Several of you have asked how to submit the homework, so I just want to flag that. To submit homework, please email it to Wendy Stout, whose email is in the chat. Her email is wstout@vt.edu. Also, a quick introduction to the purpose of the rest of the upcoming breakouts, which should be familiar from last week if you were here. Exercises will provide participants the opportunity to discover NASA datasets through collaboration with one another. Instructions for the exercise are included in the shared document, the participant guide. An UNBOUND team member will be in each room for support. In this exercise, your team will search for a particular data set. You will choose one person to act as the driver, one person to act as the navigator, and one person to act as the observer. The navigator will provide directions to the driver, who will take the wheel via mouse and keyboard and follow the navigator's instructions as the pair attempts to locate the data set. This activity is most helpful with frequent communication between the navigator and the driver, as well as input from the rest of the participants as you go along. The observer will take notes and summarize the insights for the group when we return to the main session. The observer will focus on how the information was accessed and highlight any sticking points encountered. These breakout groups are going to be 35 minutes, with 5 minutes to review the homework, 5 minutes to choose roles, and 25 minutes to find the new information. This room will have someone here if you need. We are asking you to please follow the links provided in the chat to your assigned breakouts, the number of which you can find in the participant guide. But before you go, I just want to flag that groups 1 and 2 have been merged. And so if you are in group 2, please actually go to group 1 today. Group 2 will not have anyone in it. If you end up all alone, come back here and we will make sure that we get you to the right place. I look forward to seeing you in a few minutes. Well, I have 12:20, so in the interest of keeping us on time, I want to welcome you all back to the main room. We would like to take a few minutes to collect your initial reflections on this activity. So if you will please use the links provided in the participant guide and to be posted in the chat by Blake to comment, we would appreciate that. We want to know a little bit about, were you familiar with the data prior to today? What did you find useful about the data? What impediments do you think may affect your application of the data, and how comfortable you would feel applying this data? So please join me in this reflection activity as you are able. I think some of you may have just joined us. So a recap of what I've asked the group is to go to the reflection activity, which is pasted in the chat, and please start responding to these questions. And so to respond to these, you want to click the plus sign underneath the question, and it will add your comment under that when you click publish.
And Nicole, I'd like to chime in to add, if we're talking about a couple different data sets and tools in these exercises, if you manage to get to, 2 or 3 of those, then just make a little note about which element you're referring to. We'll infer mostly that it's the first one, but if you are going on to the others, just say that it was about the precipitation data or the surface water data, et cetera, and that'll help us as we collate these responses later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see this is filling out really well. So we appreciate all of your input here. Please keep providing us input. At this time, we're going to conduct the report out section. And so if you were an observer in your group, we're going to ask you to take 2 minutes to share your greatest success and your greatest challenge with the exercises that you were able to work through. So I'm going to stop sharing. And if we could start with group 1's observer, please unmute.
Hi, my name is Emma. I'm the observer for Group 1. So for us, we started off trying to search for like the most relevant tool to use. So we started off with going to PODAC and then the CMR virtual directories. I apologize. So we utilized CMR virtual directories for a little bit, put in the dates, and then got to a part where we were kind of able, or at a section where we could download the data on the CMR virtual directories, but there was a little bit of a problem with downloading it. So we decided instead to go to the Earth data, and there was a suggestion to first draw a boundary on the study area, Porto Alegre, Brazil. However, we did have difficulties finding the location in the Earth data tool. But after a couple minutes, we were able to find it. We were able to filter the timeline, and we searched for surface waters, but then we came across another obstacle where we had difficulties finding the surface water data set specifically that the question asked for. Only about 12 data sets popped up, and none of them were what we were looking for. So we had to redefine our parameters a little bit until we found the OPERA dynamic surface water extent data set. So we looked into that, redefined our dates a little bit. Another team member suggested to adjust the start and end dates of the data set. And then we got to a spot where we could download 2 granules. So we downloaded the 2 granules. However, multiple files popped up for each one of the granules, and there was confusion on which file to navigate to. And there was also difficulty with the second part of the question on finding the layers option, because we were trying to figure out, well, we're looking for the before and after of the flood extent, but like, what do we use to find this, or how do we use this data to answer this question? So there was also some confusion on like if this specific step of downloading that data was going to be the step to answer that question. So a couple of obstacles that we came across with trying to analyze and find the data. That's as far as we got.
Thank you. Group 2, will your observer please unmute and share some of your successes and challenges in 2 minutes?
I think 1 and 2 were the same, remember?
Oh, correct. Group 3.
I thought I was off the hook for a little longer.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. My name's Kyle. I was the observer for Group 3, and Amanda was the navigator, and we had George driving. We started out, we went straight to the world view to find the surface water extents. Maybe it's because I pushed it that way and I'm a visual person and I like the interactive nature of it, and experimenting with data. So we were able to get the Porto Alegre area pretty quickly. And then we had trouble trying to find a way to compare it at first, but we found the comparison tool, and that was a nice feature to look at 2 different dates. A struggle with that one was just dealing with the various spatial and temporal and cloud kind of based limitations. We went on to the next task. We had trouble really trying to find it off the bat. And then we ran out of time, and George showed us the single pixel tool at the very end and how that could be useful. But is that about it? Did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered it. I think what our group highlighted is the different access points, and that's something we've seen through the course of this series is we have one endpoint that we want to get to, and there are multiple pathways to that endpoint. And our group chose the worldview path, which is great for some things, and for other informational pieces, it takes a little longer to get to those pieces of content. So I think Kyle summed it up pretty well.
Great, thank you. Group 4. Is your observer available?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Hi. So we were comfortable, but not too much, or rather not. To say it first, we Google we Googled some information, and we found this website with 2 views, but we thought perhaps it's not the right place, and then we searched for dynamic surface water extent that was shown to us. We went through the JPL site and found eventually the correct NASA dynamic surface. Yeah, we saw the correct site, but no visual interface, and then we eventually click on granule something and found the visual interface that we were looking for. And then the question was what granule means. And then after to answer the questions, it was not intuitive, a lot of guesswork. And when we click on the plus, something was happening, but sometimes not. We click on download, and after quite some lagging, something happened, but we were a little lost. Yeah, that's it.
That's okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Group 5, can your observer unmute?
Hello. We had similar circumstances to the rest of the groups. We actually started by Google searching NASA dynamic water extent in the Google, and it immediately popped up with the jet propulsion link and also the PODAC link. So those got us on the right track right away, which was good. But once we got in there, it was like the other groups where it was just wanting us to download the data, and we were having trouble trying to find how to view that on the web. So we kind of got stuck in a loop where it was sending us to the Earth data search to get data, and then back to the PODAC link. So it was interesting that it just kept kicking us off to one to the other, but not really joining the two. But luckily, with about 15 minutes left, Jessica got us on the right track and shared a link with us that the group was really able to quickly work through and use the filters, add data, and then the time slider bar at the bottom to find the data that we actually needed. So it worked out well.
Great, thank you. And thank you to all of our observers for reporting out with us today. I want to thank everyone who joined us today for participating, and remind you that if you have any additional thoughts that you want to share about any of our participants, about our, presenters, or about the activities, then those reflection activities will remain open for you. So you can always return to those as you like. I just want to review that today we were looking at these NASA resources associated with flood risk management. And so we thank you for working through some of those with us. Do expect an email from us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.